Welcome, everyone. And before we begin, I'd like to say thank you to our amazing team at IDC Win behind the scenes today, who without their efforts in this important event would not be possible. Thank you, Lisa, Wendy, Stacy, and Lara for your tireless work. My name is Henriette Bichai. I'm the Vice President of the Region of Quebec at IDC Worldsource Insurance Network. Today, a dear friend of mine, Mireille Mishriki, reminded me that today we must salute all the women who precede us. Through their efforts, we've inherited the right to vote, equal access to higher education, equal rights under law, the possibility to be elected into public office, and we urge you to continue to challenge injustices wherever they persist. Happy International Women's Day to all. We rock. Our team at IDC Win is excited to have these incredible women join us on International Women's Day. Let me introduce them to you. Donna Carbell, Senior Vice President, Individual Insurance for Equitable Life. Karlee Vukets Co., an independent full-service boutique financial planning service business. Jamie Wolfe, Regional Manager, Sales, Service, and Delivery Operations Canada for Tesla. Oricia Smith, President, SLGI, Asset Management, and Senior Vice President, Investment Solutions for Sun Life. For those who are listening in, we are amongst giants, and you will have no doubt have questions throughout the event. Feel free to use the chat feature, which is monitored by our team. The theme of this year's International Day is Break the Bias. As women, we all know that the opportunities don't typically come knocking on our door, and particularly in our male-dominated industry. We have to create our own opportunities. So today I ask you, what does break the bias mean to you? Karlee, do you want to kick it off?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here and honored to be amongst some incredible women on this panel. So thank you for having me. When I think about this year's Break the Bias theme, especially in this male-dominated industry, I actually think a lot about environments. So over the pandemic, I got into gardening. And so I'm going to use a gardening analogy today, which is really when you focus on the environment and you focus on the soil, whatever is there will grow. And so we're so focused on gender equality and what are the paths to get there. So there's a lot of conversation about quotas and statistics and what are the numerics behind the results we're seeing for gender equality. But it's not only about that for me, it's also really about what are the environments we create, and do women or other genders feel comfortable in those environments? Because if we actually get to that 50-50 equality, does it still feel really good? And what's the human experience behind those statistics? So when I think about that, I think about, we're in a period of great resignation. And I think that's also just speaking to the need that I'm seeing to create healthier environments to make everybody feel welcome. So that's what I think about when I think about this year's International Women's Day theme.
I'll jump in. I love how you started and kicked that off. But for me, break the bias is really throw those scripts out the window that you've had before. So what your mother did, what your grandmother did, what a traditional role was for a woman or is for a woman, you need to throw that in the garbage. Get rid of it. And you do you 110%. So for me, a bias is an inherent stereotype that's pressured among women. And it's just so important to not define what motherhood looks like, what a woman in the workforce looks like, what a wife or a partner traditionally looks like. You need to consistently reinvent your life and your work. And so it really meets your needs as a human being. And I work really hard at that every single day. There's pressures even from my own mother sometimes. And I have to challenge her every single time and say, you know what, Mom, it's not going to work like that anymore. I will be the dominating parent in the household. I will take up space in a meeting. I will travel 70% of my work time if I need to. I'll go alone to a wedding if my husband doesn't want to come. And that's the courage that we all need to have, I think, this Women's Day.
Jamie, I love those comments. I love reflecting as well back on our history and our family. And so maybe I'll start by sharing that I am Ukrainian. And so while I don't have immediate family there right now, I did want to acknowledge the crisis there, the loss of lives and freedom. My grandparents, they fled the Ukraine in the 40s, and my mom was born in a refugee camp in Germany. She came to Canada and lived her life in Kirkland Lake. Again, nothing in my career looks anything close to the challenges they face, but I think about the resilience and what I've learned from her stories and experience, and that gets passed on through the generations. So to me, breaking the bias is exactly that. Is standing up to barriers. It is challenging things. It's also asking for help. And so, I think about some changes that I've gone through in my career, where I've actually had to acknowledge that I don't really know what to do. I've never done it before. And I've needed to ask people for help. And it's very powerful. Being in that position where you ask for help and you see the power of this community around you that steps in and offers to help you with that. So yeah, to me, that is what breaking the bias is all about, is really just being vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help, and just trust yourself to get way outside your comfort zone.
It's interesting, all three of you sort of touched on this, but when I think about break the bias, I think about really just being honest with yourself and then making your own choices. And those choices might be to travel 70% of the time. Those choices might be to stay home. Those choices might change as, your family dynamics change and your work life changes. And so, for me in my career, I've always tried to just be, and it's not easy because you get advice. And it's good advice, and it comes from a place of positive intent, but it's a biased advice. And so you have to be really honest with yourself of what you want to do, what makes you happy. And if at this moment, what makes you happy is putting your family ahead of career, or your career ahead of family, or trying your best to balance both of them, which is always incredibly challenging. But really just being honest with yourself of what, drives you, what gets you excited, what gets you up in the day to, get back to work again. And, I think Jamie said it, you do what you want to do. And that choice is incredibly powerful if you can figure it out.
The choice to do you is incredibly powerful. And Oricia mentioned Ukraine and any country of conflict or political differences. And we are so lucky that we have the choice. So keep doing you. So proud of you. It has been stated that the pandemic has had a greater impact on women. So a lot of articles have come out. I've read one in the Globe and Mail that there's been a disparity between women and men, and it was exacerbated by the pandemic. It has really hurt women. Jamie, can you tell me how you would respond to that?
It was one of the roughest periods for me. And I think, we still see domestic work fall traditionally onto women more than men. And I think in the situation of the pandemic, that severely impacted women in many ways. One, I think the domestic responsibility for women that are parents can be really difficult. For me, having to manage homeschool when I was not in a role that was work from home. So trying to figure out, how to manage homeschool and in my second language. So my son goes to French school. I'm Anglophone, huge strain on me being able to balance work and life. I think I had quite a few of my friends who commented on the situation. Both partners were staying home and they were making all of the meals. So they were both staying home, but somehow they ended up having to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner while working from home. And I think it's just being thoughtful in a pandemic situation and realizing how domestic work share in a new environment, whether it's work or life, really you need to be thoughtful and make sure that you have, if you are with a partner, make sure that you have a fair work share with that partner and you're really talking about the day-to-day and how your life is being impacted. It was so stressful for so many people. I also have the pleasure of working with a team of phenomenal mechanics at Tesla, who of course came to work every single day through the pandemic, even in the earlier days. And the stress on those gentlemen while their families were at home, but knowing they were getting in and out of consumer vehicles, not knowing a lot about that virus, but then having to go home to their families and their children, knowing every single day they could have been exposed multiple times to a virus we didn't know very much about. But they were the breadwinners in their family and their job was essential. So they were on the front lines essentially. And so I think those stresses were quite significant for many people involved. And I just have to say, for me, I look back on it and I did become more resilient. And I think I look for the silver lining in everything, and that's what we need to do here. But I also had some real tough discussions with my husband about homework and how he really needed to step up at a certain point because I had to go back to work. So I'm encouraged to all of you who made it through that period. And I think, hindsight's always 20/20 for all of us, but I think women definitely took the brunt share. I think Karlee spoke about the great resignation, and obviously you see that to hit women very, very hard. That's my comments on that.
And Jimmy, maybe I'll jump in. I heard a report from McKinsey this morning that, women, they hung on this year. They're actually experiencing this kind of burnout, and it's maybe a little bit unsustainable. And so they were reporting that the gap between men and women that are reporting feeling burnt out at work, it's nearly doubled. So it used to be about 4% gap, and now it's a 7% gap. So about 42% of the women they reported were feeling this way. And of course, tied to that great resignation, that employees that are feeling burnt out, I think are about 1.6 times more likely to consider downshifting, like actually stepping back from their jobs or actually leaving their jobs completely. And so to me, now more than ever, it's really important for us to support employees and their well-being. It's ironically, it's probably not a surprise that, to me, female managers are probably better at doing that than their male peers. When we go out and ask employees, and I think McKinsey had it as part of their survey, that women managers tend to show more emotional support. They checked in more often on people's overall well-being, and they took actions to prevent burnout and manage burnout. And so again, it's a time, again, for us female leaders to step up and show that side, right? To be empathetic, to be vulnerable, to have those conversations with people. That's what people need right now. And so I'm, again, just, thrilled that we've shifted a little bit our view around what makes a strong leader and kind of the biases around of what it looks like to be a leader, and actually are seeing a little bit more of the vulnerable and the people side come out in businesses.
Yeah, it's so true. Like when during the pandemic for the teams I was working with, I remember very vividly, I had done a lunch and learn session with a group of young women. It was not quite a year ago now. And I sort of opened up with a really simple question of, did you do anything during the pandemic that you honestly never thought you'd do? And, I won't share every single story they told me, but a couple of them were really interesting. Like, yeah, I had to double check that I had turned my camera off because I had to breastfeed during one of my meetings. And I was doing a presentation and literally handing my 2-year-old popsicles under the desk. Those all came from women. I didn't hear a lot of men talking about that. And, there was this sort of concept that I was working with that, at times we thought it was really frowned upon to bring your work home. And what we did was we brought our lives to work. Everybody opened up. You could see behind you, you'd say, oh, where's that picture from? And you'd see little faces pop in and you'd see little noises in the back, and everybody's, I don't know how many COVID dogs there were, but there was a ton of that. And so you all of a sudden opened it up. And, I think you're right. Leaders, men and women that have that empathetic side wouldn't shy away from it. They'd say, oh, who do we have here? And, a little face would pop up and it was okay. All of a sudden it was okay. And your family is just a part of who you are. So all of a sudden that became a part of who you are as an employee. And there's some real good that came out of that, I think. And I hope we don't lose that as we go forward.
I have 3 teenagers and I have 2 dogs. One is a COVID dog. And I was voted the most likely to have my dogs bust in because they can open my door. And so unless I block it with a chair, they push on the lever and they come into my office and they jump on the sofa. So yeah, people know, again, as teenagers, a little bit easier I didn't have to manage having young kids, and I have a lot of friends that do. Very different for them, having to work and manage their kids' online school. For me, that they're a little bit older, so a bit more self-sufficient. But yeah, it's the dogs that, they've made appearances many times. So.
Well, women are often that caregiver role, whether it's kids or elder care or dogs or whatever, like just tend to gravitate to that role. So, everybody's got their own. It's an interesting situation. I think the pandemic sort of aligned us all to having somewhat of an experience that was similar, but everybody had their own unique situation. And I think it sort of opened up people's eyes about what was really happening and how people were balancing even before the pandemic.
In my experience, so for those of you who don't know me, this financial advising is my second career. So I studied business and film in California, and I worked in live TV production for a long time. So I was fortunate enough to work on many incredible shows like American Idol and American Music Awards. And I worked for a talent booking company that was run by women. It wasn't purposely all women, but there was 11 women. And at one point, a male, and our IT guy was male. So there's an element of like, what do you know? And what do you come up with? And so in the entertainment industry gets a very bad rap for gender equality. And there are some horrific practices that have happened in Hollywood, but they're quite a visible industry. So from my perspective, I think what happens is a lot of people point fingers at the Hollywood inequalities and practices that have happened. And they say, oh, Hollywood's so bad, at least we're not as bad as Hollywood. But in my experience coming into the financial industry, not as much in downtown Toronto, but when you go to the national conferences, you realize there's actually much more of a gender divide than I personally experienced when I was working in California. And I think a part of that, and I know I'm going a little bit off topic on the pandemic now, but it's like, it's unfathomable to me that like employers think of their employees as employees and like not human, like that people are embarrassed to like talk about their dogs and their kids or like have their kid run in on a meeting. And so like during the pandemic, it would happen. And I was even, some men and the kids would come in, hey, can I have, this treat? And I saw that with men and women, they'd always be so apologetic, and I don't have kids, so I didn't experience that part of the pandemic. And I totally know that parents went through a whole different experience, and working parents went through a whole different experience with the pandemic. But it's like I can't comprehend that wasn't okay, or people don't think that's okay, because I came up in an environment where like talking about your family and bringing dogs to work was very much the norm. And so I think when I think back to environments we're creating, and we talked about, female managers being able to create those more empathetic environments, is like, what are the things that we can do now? So when I even think about how I'm building my business, we do a 6-minute meditation practice at the start of our staff meetings, even just with my one colleague, right? It's not like, oh, once I build a team, I'm going to do that when. What can we do now to make those environments more healthy for all of our team members, and make it humans first, employees second, is kind of how I look at that.
To me, I love how you talked about the biases in the industry. It's a big platform of mine. I feel very strongly that we need to have female advisors because they understand the needs of female investors, and the way that they provide advice is holistic. To me, there's a lot of great attributes. And yet females are so underrepresented in the advisor community. And I'm sure you've seen that the Environics reports that about 18% of financial advisors in Canada are female. And we've been stuck that way for the last 15 years. To me, we should have more females in the industry, building relationships and working with clients. And so I think there's actually something structural there that we're doing a lot to try and support female advisors entering the industry. But you think about things like maternity leave, and are we doing enough to support females when they go on mat leave to make sure they come back to a set of clients that's bigger and in a better shape than when they left it, or right? Do they need to shorten their mat leave because they're worried about their clients, right, kind of not being there when they return? So to me, I think there's a lot that we need to do as an industry, and again, a lot that I'm doing as part of my business to really support female advisors. And also because, to me, females will control more wealth in the future, right? I think I've read a stat that about 40% of all wealth in North America will be set to be controlled by women. And yet very few Canadian women understand finances, and less than half, I think, have a written financial plan. So we've got a ways to go.
I think also in the biases, if I may just jump in here, Oricia, it's in breaking the biases and working with clients and female clients, because I know there's a lot of advisors who will be tuning into this as well. One of the things, we've done a lot of client validation calls, and one of the things that I hear from a lot of women, because I work with young couples, kind of 25 to 45, and women under 45 as well, which is not a huge, most people focus in an older demographic, or so it's kind of a unique practice in that way. But a lot of the women who choose to be childless as well also don't feel like they have a space, and that advisors often will use the comment of like, oh, well, you'll have a kid one day. And so in Break the Bias, I would encourage the advisors who are on the call to look at your own biases when you work with female clients or young couples. If couples decide to be childless, or doing something just a little different, maybe they don't live in the same place and they're still making a relationship work and doing a long distance relationship, and just being okay with whatever your clients bring to you as their goals and their lifestyle, rather than trying to put your own bias on, oh, well, you'll want to get married one day and have kids one day. It's like, maybe not. And that's okay. And really honoring them and make sure they feel heard in that, because I've just heard too many stories of women still to this day walking out of not being able to really find and connect with advisors because they get certain comments or like that when they go into and try to find somebody to work with. So
incredible. I have to say that with every change, we have to first change ourselves. So I've heard all of you, and I know that I'm quite impressed. And breaking the bias begins first with me. And so if I want to break the biases out there, I break it in my home first, in my personality, in my perspective, in my approach with people. So thank you very much. Some of the things that we've talked about, and I know that some of our financial advisors, this may not be their first career. I don't know if it wasn't my first career, and pivoting from one career to another can be incredibly challenging. And there's many reasons why we do it. If we can begin with Jamie, you've pivoted from an engineering space into a space like Tesla. If you can talk to us a little bit about the differences and how you've experienced your teams and gender biases there.
Yeah, I've done a few pivots in my career, and I think I always start to feel a bit of stagnation at a point. And for me, when I start to feel stagnation, I know I need to change something. And so that can be an internal move, higher education. But I think a particularly interesting one, I did previously work in aerospace engineering before I joined Tesla. I had an amazing career. I loved my job. I worked in traditionally an engineering environment, which was heavily dominated by white males. The work was awesome. Lots of math, lots of physics, engineering integration. I probably was at a level of engagement that I never even thought was possible. I learned every single day in my work day, which is something we all look for. I did become one of the only women in the leadership team at that time, and I definitely did notice some bias. That job became increasingly difficult for me. I am a type of person, I do take my seat at the table. I will speak up, but it was difficult. I would speak up, and I would often get told to calm down. I speak very, very fast paced. And it was always, I was given signals to calm down. I was coached to pay my dues in terms of career growth. One of my male mentors at one point, who was assigned to me, told me that what was really holding me back was that I didn't wear my hair up in a ponytail, and I should consider not wearing my hair down. And so there were some signals that maybe I needed to change things up. And I was approached by Tesla. Also, an industry being automotive and tech, heavily male dominated. But the culture at the company was dramatically different. And that's kind of where I wanted to speak to right now is, even in the same industry, it's shocking how different cultures can be from one employer to another. And really, when you're looking for that next role or internal mobility, really looking at a place where you can thrive. I went from being one of the less educated people in my engineering role. I was surrounded by PhDs and I only had a master's, to being very highly educated at Tesla. I was often one of the oldest people in the room, although I was in service. So I was one of the only females in the mechanic role. Tesla has a lot better balance between women and men. And I found the culture really thrived on young people speaking up, taking a spot, challenging the status quo. And for me, it was a great move because I am a disturber by nature, and I like to poke holes in things, really challenge. And so I think when you're starting to feel that, something's not right, I think that's the time to look around. One practice that I have, every 45 days on my calendar, I have an invite that I send to myself, and it says, look for a new job. So multiple times a year, I go online and I apply to jobs. And it's just to make sure that I keep myself fresh. And sometimes I apply for like a lot of jobs, and sometimes I apply for one or two, and it really just keeps you in tune. So if I can give you one tip, it would be that. Put some recurring meeting on your calendar at some interval. It can even be once a year, and just don't let yourself stagnate. And that'll encourage you to just see what opportunities are out there.
Amy, I love that story. I was thinking, it reminded me, I started my career in investment banking, which is, was pretty intense. And again, mainly males. And I remember I had a female boss, and she had told me that you have to wear a skirt and nylons every day, that I wasn't allowed to wear pants. So it's just like, you're like, doesn't make sense now when you think about it. But we have come a long way. And I think about it in my position, I'm in a position now where I can actually affect change. And that is another kind of, to me, an area to really think about, is that when you have that power to use it for something good. And so when I looked at the industry, so I'm in the asset management industry, right? I run an asset management company, and then also an insurance wealth business with segregated funds and payout annuities. And across the industry, across portfolio managers, I think it's maybe 14% of like all 25,000 portfolio managers globally are women. Again, similar to the advisors, that hasn't changed much at all. And so I was in a privileged role where our company, we actually hire third-party asset managers. So we build solutions that are open, and we also have an insurance general account that invests money with third-party managers. And so at Sun Life, I think we have about 130 billion that's actually managed by managers outside of Sun Life. And so I was in a group that did manager research. And so we thought, if I want to change this, I could actually start asking every manager that does business with us to report their diversity, equity, inclusion stats. So I want to know how many females there are at the board level, but I also want to know how many females there are at senior executives. And I want to know how many females there are within your portfolio management teams. And so we did that in 2018, the first ones in Canada to actually ask those questions. And a lot of the managers came back a little bit shocked. They're like, we don't track this. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'd like you to report, and we're going to start to track. And so even though we didn't necessarily make any decisions off it, it's that kind of idea of you measure what matters. And we're all in a position where you can, in some way, start to affect some change. Again, an easy way to do it is, as owners and investors of capital, when you move money, people listen. And so again, that's to me, it's an important part of our role and our responsibility, is to make sure that when we're investing capital, either for ourselves or our clients, that we're doing some good in the world with that.
I'll jump in a little bit just on career. It's interesting. I've had a number of different situations. It's really fascinating to hear your story, Jamie. I love the way you refer to yourself as a natural disruptor, or what would the wording you use, but I love that. It's interesting in my career, and I think I started off by saying, in terms of breaking bias, like I think what I have found is you really have to be honest with yourself and be very, very true to what it is you love doing. I've had some of those very similar stories where you've been in a room and had to find your voice, been put on the spot, been the only woman in the room, and pointedly, I remember one situation where, room of executives, I'm the most junior person in the room, the only woman in the room. And all these guys sort of turned to me and said, yeah, we think we might need an executive female program. Donna, you're the only one that could really speak to it. Do you feel like you're unsupported? And like 12 eyes are on me. And you're just like, oh no, I feel really supported right now. Thanks for asking for my feedback. But throughout my career, I had lots of times where I was given advice to take a particular role, and I went the exact opposite. And I did that because I really spent time understanding the work and understanding what I wanted to do. And what I found was they were steering me towards roles to demonstrate that I could, behave in that sort of male-dominated boardroom. And it wasn't interesting to me. It wasn't the work I wanted to do. I wanted to get in there, roll up my sleeves, and do really great work in different situations. And, I was sort of critiqued at the time many times, and in fact, as recent as last summer, why would you do that? That's lesser than you could do. And I think, that's not the work I want to do, though. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't sexy, well, as sexy as insurance could possibly be. But even recently, I made a big decision to leave what is a very large, phenomenally successful multinational corporation to come to a very small Canadian-based mutual. And all along the way, I aligned myself to my decisions, to my values, and the work I wanted to do. And that was really, really important to me, and ensure that I was, enjoying the work, and I could put 100% into it because I loved it, not because it was just another experience or another step on the ladder and things like that. I've always sort of thought of myself, on a jungle gym, as opposed to a ladder that goes up and down. You go up and around and up, all over the place, and you just sort of pick your experiences based on, what you're good at, what you want to learn, what you're not very good at. There's lots of experiences I selected because I wanted to learn something different, but it was always kind of based on, what I really felt in my gut, and always sort of went with that instinct. Not always easy to do when the advice you're getting is often the complete opposite.
Donna, I love that. And I am going to jump on that as well. It reminds me of a great book by Gay Hendricks, who talks about the zone of genius. And there's a zone of incompetence, a zone of competence, a zone of excellence, and a zone of genius. And I think that oftentimes, even if we're excellent at something or good at something, people want us, to do it, or lead us in a direction of, oh, we need more women doing that. And so rather than, is that really my zone of genius? And the excellence one is hard because it's like, I could be good at it, but do I love it? And is that what I want to do with my time? And I think back to two stories. I was lucky enough when I was in California, my boss used to say, Karlee, I need you to do your Karlee thing. And so I now call it the Karlee process, which is like taking a client, wrapping my arms around it, seeing from the big picture, going down to the granular. And that's like a huge zone of genius. It was like jumping between the two that I have, and helps me work with clients. So there's a huge crossover from my previous career. But I also think back, my dad told me a story once when he was at KPMG, and some of you may know Mike Vukets, who's in this industry, but when he was at KPMG, he's a genius in the boardroom. He just sees these numbers. And he said, I had a boss who looked at me young, and a mentor who said, if I ever see you behind a computer, you're fired. And so he always was in boardrooms with clients and had a team that was helping to support on the computers. But, to the extent where he didn't have a computer till the pandemic in his whole career. So I just think about what if, oftentimes when women are coming up, it's like, oh, learn all the moves, make yourself, indispensable to the team, which is true in a way. But then it's also, I think more women in mentoring scenarios, whether they're being mentored by men or women, need more of other people, because sometimes when it's your zone of genius, you actually don't know it's your zone of genius because you expect everybody else to do it too, because it just comes really naturally to you. disrupting Jamie, right? Like, that's a zone of genius where it's like poking holes and, looking at things from different angles, right? And so oftentimes you need other people to reflect it back to you, because you may not see it because it's just so, it's that thing you can do faster than any of your colleagues. And you just think, how doesn't anybody else see this? That's typically where to look.
There is a book called Disrupt You, and it talks about the natural disruptor and how they become trailblazers. And so listening to all of you, it's a really interesting perspective on how you have caused trailblazing throughout your industries. So thank you for that. We are always sort of women statistically are trying to achieve higher education, higher than that of a man, to feel credible, rather than surround themselves with a team. That was the traditional way of doing things. And I know that a lot of you have changed that way. If you can share with us how you have changed. Do you need to be the only genius in the room, the most powerful mind, the most innovative mind? And how do you empower and work with teams to be able to continuously lead them?
I'll start because I'm never the smartest one in the room. So that's, I can happily kick that off. And, it's interesting. I think, we all want to do it all. At some point, I think you gain a level of confidence that acknowledges you can't do it all. And as I'm building a team, you definitely want to surround yourself with people who have different skill sets than you. So if you surround yourself with you and you have a bunch of sycophants, you're going to have a really super easy management team meeting because everyone's going to agree with you and it's going to be great. But you are absolutely laser focused in one way, and you miss your blind spots, you miss all kinds of different things. So, but it takes a lot of courage. Like, it takes a lot of courage to fill a team with people who you can challenge, but yet you know that they actually are experts and they know what they're talking about. And I've done that significantly all through my career. You think about, I'm in the insurance practice. I have a team, and I've a couple of great people that work for me in particular who are actuaries and financial minds, and I rely on them. And you have to rely on them. You want to ask them questions, and you want to make sure that you're all aligned. But you certainly can't fill your team with everybody that is like you. And you know what? The same goes when you're managing your home life. Right? You gotta, we sort of refer to it as divide and conquer. Like, you kind of gotta divide and conquer and have a division of labor. If to Jamie's point earlier, everything that is house falls to one person, that's not a partnership, right? You gotta pick your battles. And I think you honestly pick the things that you like to do. If you like to cook, then great, you take over the cooking. The garbage honestly would not go out for weeks if I was here by myself. Sometimes I say to myself, you're a strong, powerful woman. You got to take the garbage out. I don't want to take the garbage out. I want someone else to take the garbage out. So you got to divide and conquer and do what you do best. And I think that takes it takes a lot more confidence than people realize, because you will be challenged. You want to be challenged, but it's sometimes uncomfortable. And you want to make sure that you surround yourself with people that you trust, and that they're going to tell you where the bodies are buried. They're going to tell you you're going down the wrong path, but that are not going to be a barrier and a resistor every single time you suggest something new. You want someone that can be open to those ideas that may come from a different, line of thinking that is not theirs.
I love that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Oricia.
All right. I'm just going to jump on that because the industry talks a lot about, right, DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion. And to me, that's only part of it. One is, do you have a diverse group? And I love the comment about, right, having people that are smarter than you, that bring different perspectives. Because it's not about just gender diversity. To me, it's about diversity of thought, right? Like different tenures, different ages, different perspectives, like that. That's important. But then you have to create this culture where it's safe to speak up. It's safe to challenge. I've heard of one leader that says, if everybody agrees to something within 10 minutes of a meeting, he cancels the meeting and books it again. So that we haven't had a good dialogue, and that leads to actually risks. Like if people aren't comfortable raising their perspectives and what they see, then there may be risks in your decision that you haven't talked about. So that to me is really important. And then you also talked a little bit about experience, and then maybe this was woven in through everybody's comments. It's about, you know, your leadership and your leadership style and what makes you different. I have to admit, I'm not sure anything jumped out to me. Like I didn't see anything in myself. And unfortunately, work environments too, they don't always give you the best chance to practice. And so for me, one of my best experiences was I put my hand up one time to be a president of my daughter's not-for-profit synchronized swimming club. At the time, nobody else wanted the job because the club was losing money. But it meant something to me. I'm really passionate about keeping girls in sports. And so I jumped in, and to me, it taught me some really practical things, random things like employing temporary foreign workers and running a profitable business and learning HTML for websites. And trust me, if you want to hone your leadership skills, try leading a group of volunteers. But to me, it was that experience outside of work that really allowed me to practice. I tried a few different leadership styles and tactics and things until I got comfortable with an approach that I still use in my career today. So it's not, you know, to me, people aren't always born leaders. That you can practice the skills and you can get comfortable in a style that works for you. You just need to have the space to do it. And if it isn't within your current working environment, then there's lots of other places to try and learn.
Yeah, I also became a big fan of diversity of thought. And that was through my career. And I realized it was managing people who were functional specialists where I was not. And I think that's where I realized the opportunity for my own career as a people leader is that we have a lot of times where we do promote or sometimes over promote functional specialists because they're so good at what they do. And when you promote at that level and they become people leaders, you do get a top down pressure on, you know, how we do our job at a certain point. And I think one of the opportunities that I've had, you know, as I've managed engineers in various aeronautical specialties, I've managed salespeople now, I've managed mechanics. I mean, the mechanics were the most rewarding part of my career because I'm not a mechanic. I cannot change my own windshield wipers, which my team will be horrified if they hear this on the call. And like Donna, nor do I want to. I have zero desire to do it. So as we work through problem solving, I mean, I can facilitate a problem solving session, but I'm never going to be that specialist at the table that's bringing the functional solution to how are we going to build this plane or how are we going to fix this car. And so I rely on creating an environment for my team to speak up. And what I found, which was really interesting, a lot of these people throughout their entire careers had had leaders that were functional specialists. So they had never been empowered and uplifted. And I would say the most loyal people that I've ever had the pleasure to work with, really the value that they saw in me was this space that I gave them to take up space at the table to solve problems, to elevate their careers. And that actually came from confidence in that space because I needed them. I needed to recognize their specialty. And then that synergy between the two of us just created awesome forward movement in those teams because we had the perfect blend of different backgrounds to be able to solve problems faster, more efficiently.
It's funny, Jamie, I was going to chime in there. Like one of the best pieces of advice I got early on in my career was there's a time to work for someone who knows more about the business or the function or the role, because you learn a ton from them, right? Like if you're new and you want to learn a new business, it's great to work for someone that can help you. And then there's times to work for someone who doesn't know, who you know more about the business, because you get that space that you just talked about. And I think both experiences are equally valuable as you're coming through your career, but that space to be able to, you know, when you're working for someone who really has been there a long time and they know everything and they don't always ask for your opinion because they don't need it. It's not because they're, you know, not interested. They really just don't need it and they can move decisions along. And it feels like a really great place to work because it's fast. But then, you know, conversely, if you're working for someone who, like I'm brand new to my role, I'm 6 months, I ask a ton of questions. They might have been questions that the team hadn't been asked for a little while because the leader before had been there longer. So it's great to have both, I think, experiences as you're sort of moving up through the organization.
I want to give kudos to Jamie because I have seen her the morning of a birthday party, her son, Ivan, a very incredible young man's birthday party. She sat there early morning and she was typing an email, and I questioned her. I'm like, what are you doing this early? And she said every single morning she sends an email to her team empowering them. So, to think that we think of ourselves as financial security advisors, that we're selling a product, an idea, we're selling a philosophy, we're selling a holistic approach to things. She's also selling an idea, because the innovation of something like the Tesla isn't just a car, it is an absolute idea. So I thought, and I watched her in awe, and I thought, I think I'm going to take a page from her book and see if we can continuously empower our team. So I think it's really incredible to see that kind of leadership, and I think it's made a big difference in our industry and in hers. So congratulations to you, Karlee. I know that you focus, or my understanding is that you focus on clients who are in a demographic between 25 and 35, 40, and traditionally, as a financial advisor, we think that's not where the money is. So, we understand the importance of financial literacy and to start young, but, how do we build a sustainable business, and how do you manage the time to give to them? And how are you treating the individual female who may be in a different level in her life? And then when it happens to be in a couple, how are the interactions taking place there?
So when I got into financial advising and I realized that I moved back to LA, and once again, from LA, and I was just kind of in shock that the financial industry still had some of these like big biases and gaps. And I actually, before I got into this industry, I too went to my bank branch and started asking questions about finances. And what I learned was there's typically, and this is no disrespect to the bank branches, or maybe it is, but there's a gap, which is, people start saving a little bit and they've got this chunk of change that might just be sitting there. And it's, it could be $5,000, it could be 10, it could be 60. Sometimes it could be $100,000 just sitting in cash. And the education piece isn't there, or they're so focused on their career, they're not really taking the time out to focus on figuring out the finances, or they Google it and just get overwhelmed. And so just leave it safe. And so there was a gap between, what I noticed was there was a huge gap between, people doing well and when they had enough investable assets to work with an advisor in that traditional investable asset model. And so that was a sweet spot of like, these are, women and couples doing some cool things in their career that excite me and lit me up. And when I got into the business, I had a lot of advisors go, great, you want to work with women. I still get this to this day. You really should focus on widows and divorcees. And I do have some people who are in those categories, but it just didn't quite feel authentic for me as a advisor coming at, because what really excites me is these younger women. And so I really just had to rethink the model. And so after I got my certified financial planning designation, I moved to a fee for service model, and I do a little bit of a hybrid because I still work with a lot of young couples on term insurance, right? But term insurance in itself also may not build a full business and an advisory practice or a scalable one. And so I just said, okay, there's also a lot of young couples or women who want to use Wealthsimple or Questrade, and they actually don't want to move their funds, or they don't want to feel like they have to move their funds, but they want a conversation about their financial goals and their cash flow and their advice. And so I just said, you know what, this is an area that we can try and innovate. So over the last year and a half, I launched a financial planning subscription model. So my clients pay an annual subscription fee and every year we go through, what's your goals for the next year? What level of subscription do you want to fit that? How many meetings do you want in a year? If you're building towards, buying a house, sometimes I have couples or women who want to phone me up, can I afford an extra $100,000 on this house? And we do the calculations. What's that mortgage look like? And especially in the Toronto buying market. And there just wasn't, a space for that. And so I'm starting to see a few more advisory businesses like my own that's either hybrid or fee for service planning pop up. And I'm excited to see that. And I'm excited to see how it expands, because I also think, part of it is women advisors getting into the business don't love the prospecting element and the marketing element of it so much, but some of them are just so genius of working with clients and the relationship management part of it And so I have a philosophy and a larger vision of working towards elevating women, both clients and advisors in the business of, can we build a model that essentially could be, maybe not every advisor wants to earn millions of dollars and build a business that could earn that much, but maybe they just want to build a business that they could, have that time freedom and earn, 60 grand a year or 100 grand a year or 200 grand a year. And is there a financial model that they can do that with a comfortable book of business? So we're kind of testing it out and creating a test case for it. And I'm excited to see how that evolves and grows. So just looking at things from a
I do need to drop off, but I love that you're challenging the model in the industry and filling that gap where, again, I think as an industry, we've done a pretty bad job. We use a different language. We tend to overcomplicate things. And it's about, right, a holistic plan and helping people in achieving whatever goals they are. There's a lot of personal conversations that have to happen between an advisor and their clients. And so I absolutely love that you're looking at, right, how to provide the service without fitting the existing mold. So again, thank you, ladies. It's been wonderful joining you today. I do need to drop off, but it was a wonderful discussion. I learned a lot.
Thank you. We're going to continue for a few more minutes before we let you all go.
Thanks, Oricia. Bye.
We've had a question from the audience saying, what do you guys feel, or where are the limits of honesty? Do we tell our friends, families, parents, I'm doing me? Where do you feel the limits can be before we have too much resistance and then things come tumbling down? I can share with you that when I started in this career very, very long time ago, I was the first woman in Quebec to own just a little tiny MGA. And I remember someone telling me on the phone when I argued with them over something that you're going to be okay, little girl. And my mom, similar to what Jamie was saying, she was like, this is too much for you. And you have, you want to have your kids one day. And what do you mean you're traveling for work? And I'm constantly having to tell her, we're a team at home and everyone's got to hold up their own. But I sometimes have to convince myself. So where does the level of honesty begin and end? Is it ultimate? Are we in a free world? We're in North America. This is our chance to break all biases. What are your thoughts?
What's the worst thing you're going to hear is generally like no, or somebody that disagrees with you. So I used to do this fun thing when I would go to bars, and I was a lot younger. And I would just ask people for $1. And I'd be like, hey, can I have $1? You would be surprised how many people will just give you $1. And I think I realized back then, like testing limits was just so powerful as a female. You make these limits that just don't exist. Like you ask for more money, you ask for a promotion, you ask for that extra week of vacation. And all of the sudden, people actually start saying yes. So you guys probably see this in your own world quite a lot, but like the more you ask, the more people that say yes. Yeah, proportionally, you may have more people that say no, but I try to think of like the worst thing that ever happened when somebody challenged me or said no. It's like a slight moment of like panic internally, but that's it. And then you're like, okay, well, on to the next scary thing or scary no. But I think the key is it's not actually that scary. Even in the group of moms that are my friends, I think we all raise our families different. We have different careers. And sometimes you'll see that, but then there's this very quick acceptance. And I think that piece is what I have learned, growing to where I have so far is just, it's really not that bad. And so I take those risks more and more each year. And so I think it's a calculated risk for everybody, but I would just encourage you to push yourself just each year a little bit more, be a little bit more honest, ask a few more difficult questions. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what people's reactions are.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how much I might have made if I asked for $1 during my university career, but I didn't do that. I would, I agree. I don't think I've ever asked for permission in my career. Now I'm at a stage in my life where, I'm now seeing my kids catapult into the workplace, my nieces, and I feel a really a really big sense of responsibility to ensure that I'm supporting them and becoming who they are for the next generation. And so I'm super honest. I have 2 boys, they're in their 20s. And, I think very strongly that I'm raising them to be great advocates and parents and fathers and support networks and whoever it is that's in their network. And I can tell you the first text I got this morning about International Women's Day came from my son. And I was on a call with him literally 15 minutes before this, him helping me practice. He's 24. So I'm really honest about that. I'm honest about the experiences I had at work. It was a dinner table conversation. There was a few funny ones where, I'd be talking to them and they'd be 12 or 14 years old and hearing about it. And so I was never part of I never felt at a place where I needed to ask permission, but I certainly was completely honest about what I wanted to do, what my experiences were. And Henriette, you mentioned it, family is a team sport. So it was really a team sport for us. There's a lot of give and take on all of our ends to make sure that whole unit worked effectively. So we were pretty open.
I'm going to say that at home, my youngest, I have 3 sons. My youngest son said to me, "Mommy, I'm going to build you a castle and I'm going to put warriors around it." I'm like, to protect me? And my middle child walked away from the kitchen and he mumbled something. I'm like, "What did you say, Michael?" So he turned around and looked at me and he said, "You are the warrior." And I thought that was very powerful. Yeah, it was really touching. And I later went up.
Better than that.
Can't get much better than that. So, I believe that there's been no better time to be a woman. And I hope that we can say that tomorrow, that there's no better time to be a woman. And next year to say that there was no better time next year to be a woman, because that only means that we're moving forward every day. And I have to say that I lifted something from Melissa Peluso, the VP of Digital Sales and Chief Marketing Officer at IBM. She said the next generation of women will ask one simple question to us: what did we do to make the world better for them? And as I listened to all of you, and I think we stand on the shoulders of giants, and the future will stand on your shoulders, all of them who came before us, those who paved the way, because real inclusion was really important. And according to the World Economic Forum, I'm going to give a statistic, Gender Gaps report in 2020 said that it'll take approximately 99.5 years on average to close the gender gap. Why am I optimistic? Because every year we move forward and every year we do this and every year we recognize International Women's Day, we move closer to closing that gender gap. So I am very, very grateful, and we are all at IDC Worldsource grateful for your appearance with us, all the genuine conversations that you've had, the input, and everything that you are doing to disrupt your industries, disrupt and close the gender gap. Thank you for being leaders. Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of those who've attended.
Thank you for hosting and having us. Thanks for everyone joining.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.